Good morning, it's I. Happy Friday. Little history on how Uber started and Lyft, and how the taxi company functioned before that, and how limos became to be. I'll give you some general idea of how each one started, just so you have it in your brain. It's good to know the industry you're tapping into from A to Z, just so you're a different guy. You know your history. You know the mistakes of the history, so you don't repeat it. For instance, when cab started, let's see the idea of a taxi cab. Before cars, there were chariots and horses, right? I'm sure people gave luxury rides in their cabs or carriages to people who could afford, or the wagon, station wagon, that's how they used to be called, right? At train stations, there used to be a wagon pulled by a horse, I think. The whole concept of station wagon started there. Station wagon, train station. Nothing to do with the cars we see today. I don't think station wagons are a thing anymore, are they? They are now crossovers. I don't like that term. Crossover means you're in the middle. You're neither one, either the other. You're not good enough. You're a crossover. I saw Ferrari crossover. How strange that was. Like $1 million car with a 1,000 horsepower engine on a crossover. I guess if you have several millions of dollars, that's okay. That's a good mistake. It's still a mistake. Anyway, so the station wagons existed to shadow people around. And then cars were invented, yeah? I mean, of course, trains move people back, point A, point B, ships, point A, point B, airplanes, point A, point B, earth, water, air, road, highway, city. Then taxi cabs became a thing. I am sure somebody who could afford a car and offer transportation services back then. Think about this: when an industry starts, there's very little regulation. I'm sure the first guy who had that idea had a nice four-door Ford Lincoln who started giving people rides, probably in New York, all these big cities. Well, Detroit, where all the cars are manufactured. And then regulations came after probably serious issues started happening. People started charging too much, people started driving too fast, people started mistreating their drivers. So on both sides, there were a need for regulations. Then a taxi cab became an industry. Most cities drafted their own regulations. Yellow cab, it's probably one of the oldest, most classic form of taxi franchise. But then, limousines. Where do limousines fit on that? Let's fast forward 1930s or 1920s, when transportation by car became something and cars were more like affordable. I'm guesstimating, let's Wikipedia this later. Then fast forward to 1950 or 60s, whatever. The word limousine, where does the word limousine come from? It's a French word. Limousine is an area in France that grows champagne. And there was a need of a professional driver to shuttle people around the wineries in limousine. That's where the word for the car limo started. Limousine. It's an area in France for wine drinkers or champagne. Don't call it sparkling wine. Call it champagne. Limousines became a nice commodity for who could afford it. Nice car, stretched or not, usually the color white or black. Black for executives, white for parties. Limos saw that the cabs became too far in between of a reliable transportation. It became very one-sided. Cab company owner, drivers, what's the word? It became one-sided for the cab company owners and drivers' expectations. Passengers had very little saying. Cities had their ordinances that regulated specific cab companies within their counties or cities or states. Cabs became very one-sided. It was a driver's market. For years, drivers didn't go where they didn't want to. Drivers only pick up who they wanted. They cherry-picked rides. They just want long ride, airport rides. And then the regular folk that needed a ride to the hospital in a wheelchair was being left behind. In between all that, limos became an accessible option for executives. If they can book a car prearranged with the minimum hourly charge of 2 hours or 3, depending on the distance, they could have a car guaranteed because they couldn't rely on a taxi cab. Fast forward, let's say 1970s, when the Lincoln's town cars were invented, or they're probably older than that, but let's say 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, limos became an option for who had money because it was a guaranteed ride. They weren't gonna be rude. They were more trained. Limo companies were smaller than cab companies, therefore they could be managed better. They could train their drivers, they could fire their drivers, because the cab companies went from the employee model to the contractor model, in which they couldn't fire people unless they killed someone. Because otherwise they would be sued or something. Or the city would give them a license, and then if the city got a complaint, then they could be fired. But the cab company itself couldn't fire them because they held a license approved by the city. And this is where it gets interesting. If you're an Uber, Lyft driver, and if you ever think you become an employee, you're not gonna become an employee, because history shows us that it will not work. It costs a lot for the companies. They drop the prices too much. They have to make profit, squeeze everywhere they can. If they had to pay employee payroll taxes, they wouldn't be a profitable company as much as they would want it to be, because that's just the model they have. They squeeze everything out of everyone, passengers, drivers alike, so they can have X amount of profit. So cab companies couldn't fire their drivers because they were not employees. They were contractors licensed by the city, just so they could avoid paying all the benefits that an employee gets. However, taxi drivers had the right to decline rides. See the catch? Limo companies, on the other hand, would charge a premium on where they would still be profitable. Their drivers would make money, and the passenger would get the car when they wanted. Limo companies became greedy, just like taxi companies, and started charging too much. And they started keeping clients on the level of the millionaires and billionaires, where the regular guy couldn't afford a limousine or couldn't afford a car service when they had to go. Then guess what? You have taxi companies being controlled by drivers and cab owners. You have limo companies being controlled by ambitious owners who had a market target of very wealthy, middle class, maybe lower class, working class, forget it. Then Uber came. Uber saw that, the founder of Uber, I'll tell you what I know about him in another video, because he started San Francisco. Uber came and brought the limo, the quality of the limo, the flexibility of the cab driving to the app. So they eliminated the dispatch, the phone person. And the cars were a little better than your average cab. Not as good as the limos. However, when Uber Black started, they were limo standard cars, SUVs, Lincolns, crossovers, station wagons. Anyways, that's your background on taxi, limo, Uber, Lyft. Oh, and then after Uber, Lyft came, there was something else called Sidecar. I'll make a video about that. This video, I think, is the longest I've ever done. It's 11 minutes already. Okay, take care. Think about that. Digest.